Hello, I'm Dr. Timothy Lucas with the Altoona Lung Specialists. I'm going to be talking about a coronavirus vaccine and what you need to know. A vaccine is something that helps a person build immunity to an infectious disease. Vaccines work by introducing the body to an inactive form of a disease-causing germ or something very similar to it. The vaccine then stimulates the immune system of the person to produce antibodies. Antibodies are proteins that help protect the person from future infection before they ever come across the actual germ itself. Think of it like a workout for your immune system. So in the case of the new coronavirus, a vaccine would hopefully make a person resistant to an infection from the virus and the illness it causes, COVID-19. Or at the very least, make that person who becomes infected less ill when they come in contact with the virus. So who is working on a coronavirus vaccine? Well, government scientists are working on coronavirus vaccines, biotech companies, and many university researchers are all involved in an effort to develop a coronavirus vaccine. And the last time I checked, there were over 165 vaccines in process. So it's advantageous that we have so many institutions working on a prevention effort because this is a pandemic. And the pandemic, by definition, means that it's a global problem rather than a national issue to resolve. So what happens if more than one vaccine works? That's okay. For example, with the flu vaccine, there are multiple formulations on the market, including high-dose injectable vaccines and nasal spray vaccines. And if one coronavirus vaccine proves safe and effective, it might be that one works better in children, one works better in older adults, maybe one provides longer immunity. I think only time will tell, and there may be different groups that get different vaccines. Will the coronavirus vaccine be made from a live virus? So there are a handful of existing vaccines, including polio, chickenpox, MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella, that contain weakened version of a live virus that causes the disease. This is the closest thing to natural infection, and they're called live attenuated vaccines. They tend to work very well, but very few research teams are currently taking this approach with the new coronavirus. Scientists are certainly looking at different ways to introduce a piece of the virus into the body. Whether it's a protein from the virus or a genetic code that the body can use to make its own protein to stimulate an immune response. So some are studying the possibility of introducing the coronavirus by the way of a vector, where a gene for a protein of the coronavirus is inserted into a harmless, another virus that's harmless, and then delivered to the body cells. The advantage of this is it might look more realistic to the body. When will a vaccine be available? It depends on who you ask. A vaccine will probably be available by the end of 2020 or certainly in early 2021. As of now, the United States government is manufacturing or paying for the manufacture of doses of the vaccine way before we even know if the vaccine will work. So that if a vaccine proves to be safe and effective in the trials, it can be quickly deployed to the public. So there won't be a lag time waiting for the vaccine to be produced. Right now, we're waiting for what people call phase 3 clinical trials. So the third phase of a clinical trial is testing the vaccine on human candidates. Currently, the biotech company Moderna, in conjunction with AstraZeneca, AZ, they began third phase trials of a vaccine in July because their early stage trials showed that the candidates that they had in that trial, that all 45 produced an immune response. Keeping in mind that we're typically talking about candidates age 18 to 55 who are generally in better health. As of this week, their phase 3 trial is on hold. They had an individual, I believe, lived in the United Kingdom who my understanding has developed something called transverse myelitis, which is an autoimmune, your immune system attacking your spinal cord, often leading to weakness and other symptoms of spinal cord dysfunction. It's a very rare condition, but I think they're evaluating the possibility as to whether or not this bears any relationship to the virus before restarting their trial. The CEO of AstraZeneca was on television within the past 2 or 3 days indicating that they felt that they would be able to resume the trial in a very short fashion. Pfizer, another company that you might have some familiarity with the name, has also started a phase 3 trial. And these phase 3 trials look at the safety and efficacy of the vaccine in a larger population of humans. Multiple other trials are testing potential vaccines, and as last I looked, there are at least 27 different vaccines worldwide that are being administered to humans, not necessarily in phase 3 trials. And as you may know, the Soviet Union began administering their vaccine that they called Sputnik V to some of their citizens without having a phase 3 trial to support its efficacy and safety. Does it usually take this long to develop a vaccine? The timeline for the coronavirus vaccine may seem long, but in reality it's moving at quite a record speed. Vaccine development often takes about 10 or 15 years. The fastest previously was for mumps that took 4 years. It takes time for researchers to prove that the vaccine is safe and effective, and I keep using those terms. And it takes month-long trials before it's mass-produced, and then it has to be mass-produced and then distributed throughout the world. So the timeline for a coronavirus vaccine is certainly accelerated. And again, the key finding is a balance between the speed of developing a vaccine and its safety, because even a very small adverse effect, which I think is what Moderna and AstraZeneca have encountered, whether or not it's related to the vaccine has yet to be determined, but a small adverse effect when amplified on a global scale can potentially hurt a lot of people. So the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, in June released a set of guidelines for drug makers detailing the requirements that they have put forth for vaccine approval. The coronavirus vaccine candidates need to be at least 50% effective compared to a placebo in clinical trials, according to the FDA. So once a vaccine is developed, who's going to get it first? Well, high-risk populations receive the vaccine first. So again, early phase trials and even phase 3 trials are typically conducted in generally younger and healthy people, often 18 to 55 years old, with very few or no medical problems. And as you realize, the population at highest risk from severe illness from COVID-19 is an older age, 65 and older population with chronic health conditions. So if the trials are fast-tracked and certain phases are skipped, it can be risky. And we need to be sure that if we vaccinate a higher risk population, say populations with, that are older with things like diabetes, heart failure, underlying lung disease, that it's also safe and effective in that group of people. One of the issues to consider is who are the frontline workers if we're going to talk about who might get the vaccine first. So that not only would include doctors and nurses and other employees at, say, nursing homes, but that goes beyond healthcare workers to emergency responders, grocery store workers, delivery personnel, public transportation, because they're all essential to our daily function and they're all at risk for a high degree of exposure. If there is a coronavirus vaccine, will the vaccine be an annual vaccine like a flu shot? It's kind of hard to say at this point. So far, the coronavirus has not shown signs of rapid genetic change, although there has been some genetic change. So flu viruses do show rapid genetic change, and that's why the flu vaccine is needed every year. So far, that's not necessarily the case with the coronavirus, and so probably wouldn't necessarily need to be administered on an annual basis, but that certainly has yet to be determined. This is a vaccine for a respiratory virus, so it's not likely that it will confer lifelong immunity, and the answer to how often you'll have to get a coronavirus vaccine probably will fall somewhere in between. Might be yearly, might be every other year, might be every few years, That's not a question that yet has been answered.